The late afternoon sun slanted through the bay window of the Vance residence on Maple Drive, painting the perfectly vacuumed living room carpet in warm stripes of gold. It was a Tuesday, which meant the neighborhood was quiet, save for the distant hum of a lawnmower. Inside, Elena Vance moved with the familiar, comforting rhythm of her daily routine. She wiped down the already clean kitchen counters, her mind pleasantly occupied with the lesson plan for her kindergartner's upcoming unit on butterflies. In 2 weeks, she and David would celebrate their 29th wedding anniversary, and their daughter Sophie had suggested a family dinner at the new Italian place downtown. The thought brought a soft smile to Elena's face. To the outside world, and indeed to Elena herself for a very long time, her life with David was the blueprint for a successful, serene American marriage. They were Cedar Ridge's enduring sweethearts, a story that began in the bleachers of the high school football field. David, the earnest, handsome quarterback with a surprisingly shy smile, and Elena, the spirited student council treasurer with a laugh that made others join in. Their wedding photos, still displayed on the grand piano, showed a couple glowing with uncomplicated youth, believing they had mapped out their forever. And in many ways, they had built it. David built a respected career as a financial advisor, his name synonymous with trust and discretion in their small Illinois community. Elena found her calling in the chaotic joy of a kindergarten classroom, her patience and warmth making her a favorite among parents and children alike. Together, they navigated the milestones. They bought this very house on Maple Drive, painting the nursery a soft yellow when Sophie arrived, and later a sturdy blue for her brother Caleb. They hosted barbecues, where David would expertly grill burgers, while Elena arranged platters of pasta salad. They sat through countless school recitals and soccer games, their hands finding each other's in the stands. They weathered the mild storms of parenting teenagers and caring for aging parents, always presenting a united, capable front. Their annual summer trip to a lakeside cabin in Wisconsin was a sacred tradition, a week of disconnected simplicity they both cherished. Elena considered herself profoundly fortunate. While friends' marriages had frayed or fractured under pressure, hers and David's had, she believed, only grown more comfortable and deeply rooted. They were a team. He managed their finances and fixed things that broke. She curated their home and their family's emotional world. Their intimacy had evolved from passionate to peaceful, a gentle closeness she interpreted as the natural progression of a long, shared history. She trusted him implicitly, a trust so fundamental it had become invisible to her, like the air she breathed. She never questioned his late nights at the office, his occasional weekend conferences in the city, or the way he was sometimes quietly distant. She attributed it to the weight of responsibility, to the stress of providing, and she would respond with a back rub or his favorite meatloaf, proud to be the supportive cornerstone of his success. Her entire identity, the loving wife, the nurturing mother, the pillar of the community, was built upon the bedrock of this marriage. She looked around her beautiful, quiet home, at the family photos lining the mantel, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The story of Elena and David was one of perseverance, loyalty, and love. It was a story she believed in completely, a novel she had helped write over 29 years, never suspecting she had only ever read the carefully edited, public-facing first chapter. The task was mundane, almost soothing in its normalcy. David was in Chicago for a one-night conference, and Elena needed a specific policy number from their homeowner's insurance documents to finalize a claim for a storm-damaged fence panel. David, who handled all such matters, had mentioned the paperwork might be on an old laptop he kept in the back of his study closet. Elena found the sleek, silver machine tucked behind a box of tax records. She carried it to his polished oak desk, the one she dusted but never sat at, and plugged it in. The laptop whirred to life with a soft glow. She expected to be prompted for a password, a barrier she wouldn't know how to cross. But the screen flashed and went straight to the desktop. He hadn't used it in so long. It had bypassed the login. A small mercy, she thought. The desktop was cluttered with old folders. Taxes 2010 to 2012. Investment properties. Vance portfolio. She clicked around, her eyes scanning for anything labeled insurance. Finding nothing obvious, she decided to use the search function. As she typed homeowners, a drop-down menu of recent searches appeared. The top entry wasn't about insurance at all. It was the name of a website she didn't recognize, something with the word secret in it. A faint, cold prickling began at the base of her neck. Dismissing it as some financial site, she opened the internet browser instead. It automatically loaded to an email login page, but the username field was already populated. An address she'd never seen, davidsprivate34@mailbox.com. The Remember Me box was checked. With a click, she was in. No password required. The inbox was a torrent of unread messages, hundreds of them. The senders' names were all male. Jason, Mike, Traveler_21, Coach. The subject lines were fragments that made her stomach liquefy. Last night was amazing. Your place or mine? Discreet as always. She clicked one, then another, her hand trembling so violently she had to steady her wrist with her other hand. The emails were graphically explicit, detailing encounters in hotel rooms, rest stops on highways she drove daily, and once, chillingly, in David's own car. There were links to profiles on dating apps for men, with photos of David, a David she didn't know, shirtless, with a sultry, confident gaze. There were confirmation emails for bookings at cheap motels in towns just outside Cedar Ridge. Dated on evenings, he told her he was working late. A spreadsheet, neatly organized, listed first names, dates, and crude ratings. The timeline stretched back, like a poisonous vine, for over 12 years. The world in the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hall clock, muffled into a dull, underwater roar. Elena's breathing became shallow, rapid pants. She saw the dates. The 25th anniversary weekend, when he'd claimed a client emergency. The night before Caleb's high school graduation. A Tuesday last month, when he brought her flowers for no reason. Each memory, once a bright tile in the mosaic of their life, now turned dark and slick with betrayal. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a midlife crisis. It was a second, hidden life, meticulously maintained in the shadow of the one they built. The man who had kissed her goodbye that morning, who planned their retirement, who held her at their children's weddings, was a masterful stranger. The foundation of her last 3 decades wasn't just cracked, it had never existed. She was standing on a stage set, and the walls were now crashing down, revealing an endless, horrifying void behind them. Time did not slow down. Instead, it became sharp and hyper-focused, each second a clear, distinct unit to be used. The initial wave of nausea, the sensation of the room tilting, receded as if someone had pulled a drain plug. A glacial calm flooded the space it left behind. Elena's trembling hand stilled. She methodically minimized the browser, opened a blank document, and began typing a list. Her movements were efficient, robotic. First, evidence. She plugged a thumb drive she used for school presentations into the laptop. She reopened the email, her face a mask of detached concentration. She did not read the messages again. She simply captured them. She took screenshots of the most damning emails, the dating profiles, the hotel confirmations spanning years. She saved them in a folder labeled Curriculum. She forwarded a selection of the raw emails to a secondary email account she created years ago for online shopping and forgot about. The sent confirmation chimed, a soft, digital gavel. She ejected the thumb drive and slipped it into the pocket of her cardigan, the plastic suddenly feeling like a shard of ice against her chest. Next, sustenance. She walked to the kitchen, her steps measured and even. She filled a glass with water from the tap and drank it all, feeling the cold liquid trace a path down her throat, grounding her. She opened the pantry and surveyed its contents. She took a single protein bar, a banana, and a bottle of water. These went into her everyday tote bag, the one she took to school. Then, the practicalities. She ascended the stairs to their bedroom, bypassing the king-sized bed with its floral duvet. From the top shelf of her closet, she pulled down a small, carry-on-sized suitcase, dusty from disuse. She did not pack for a life, but for a disappearance. Practical jeans, plain t-shirts, socks, underwear, a warm jacket. From her dresser, she took the small, locked jewelry box that held items not for show, but for sentiment. Her grandmother's locket, her children's first baby bracelets, a seashell from her honeymoon. She did not open it. She placed the whole box inside the suitcase. From a fireproof lockbox in the study, she retrieved her passport, her social security card, and her birth certificate. Her own, separate savings account book showed a balance of $10,327. She stared at it for a long moment. She returned to the kitchen, opened the laptop one final time, and logged into their joint banking portal. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. With clinical precision, she initiated a transfer of $5,000 from the joint account into her personal savings. Exactly half of what was there. It felt like a transaction, a final settlement of a debt she hadn't known was owed. She logged out, closed the laptop, and placed it back exactly where she found it in the closet. The final step. She removed her wedding ring, the diamond catching the dying light from the window. It felt no different from removing a piece of costume jewelry. She placed it squarely in the center of the clean kitchen island, a tiny, glittering monument to the lie. She picked up her phone. She did not scroll, did not hesitate. She typed a single, unequivocal message to David. I know everything. Do not contact me. Do not contact the children until I say so. She hit send. The whoosh sound was deafening in the silent house. Then, with deliberate force, she pried off the phone's plastic case, removed the tiny SIM card, and snapped it in half between her fingernails. She dropped the pieces into the garbage disposal. The phone itself, now a useless brick, went into the suitcase. She looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 4:45 p.m. 1 hour and 28 minutes had passed since she opened the laptop. She picked up her tote bag, wheeled the small suitcase to the garage, and got into her car. She did not look back at the house. As she backed down the driveway, she saw the lens of the neighbor's doorbell camera glint in the sunset. She gave it no notice. She was already gone. David Vance returned home to a profound and unsettling silence just after 8 p.m. The house was dark, save for the undercabinet lighting in the kitchen he always left on. He called out for Elena, his voice echoing in the spacious foyer. No answer. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Perhaps she'd gone to book club early. Then he saw it. The diamond wedding band sitting like a discarded button on the cold granite of the island. Next to it, a single sheet of paper with the printed screenshot of one of his emails, the graphic text glaring under the lights. The blood drained from his face, leaving a cold, sickening emptiness. He checked his phone, seeing her final text from hours earlier. Panic, sharp and acidic, rose in his throat. His first call was not to the police, but to a discreet lawyer he knew from the city. Only after a hushed, frantic 20-minute conversation did he dial 911, his voice expertly modulated into the worried, bewildered husband. He reported his wife missing, emphasizing her stable nature, her happiness, the utter strangeness of it all. When the Cedar Ridge police arrived, he was the picture of distressed credibility, a respected professional, his shirt slightly rumpled, his eyes wide with a fear that was not entirely fabricated. He provided a flawless alibi. He had been at the Chicago conference all day, his presence verified by multiple colleagues and conference badge scans. He suggested, with artful hesitation, that perhaps Elena had been struggling with early menopause and melancholy, a concern he'd been too busy to address properly. He painted her disappearance as a tragic, spontaneous breakdown. Detective Lisa Morelli, a woman with a calm demeanor and eyes that missed little, took the lead. The scene felt off. The house was pristine, no sign of struggle. The packed suitcase and missing passport suggested planning, not a mental break. Elena's personal savings account had been drained of exactly half its balance hours before she vanished, a transaction that required forethought and access. The wedding ring left behind was a statement, not an accident. Morelli's team began the standard canvass, and the neighbor's doorbell footage confirmed Elena's calm, solitary departure. This wasn't a kidnapping, it was a departure. The investigation naturally turned to David, the spouse, the first statistical probability. A deeper look into his life began quietly. While his financial records were impeccably orderly, a forensic audit of his credit cards revealed a pattern of small, recurring charges, subscriptions to discrete messaging apps, payments to a digital wallet service, charges for mid-range hotels in neighboring counties on evenings his calendar showed as working late or golfing. Interviews with his assistant revealed David was fiercely protective of his personal phone and often took long walks during lunch, leaving his work cell on his desk. The real break came when a junior officer, running David's known email through a search, found an old, inactive profile on a forum linked to the secretive website from Elena's search history. The profile contained no photos, but the username, a variation of his private email, and listed interests were a perfect match. Morelli now saw the outlines of David's expertly constructed second life. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a man who had built an entire hidden identity to facilitate a series of clandestine encounters. The question hanging in the air of the investigation room was heavy and dangerous. Did Elena's discovery of this double life put her in the path of someone from that shadow world? Was David's secret not just a marital betrayal, but a threat that had followed her home? The case was no longer a simple missing persons file. It was a puzzle with a hidden center, and the man weeping convincingly in the living room was its most complex and deceptive piece. For 6 months, Elena Vance was a ghost in the machine. The official investigation remained open, but grew cold. David, legally separated and under a cloud of local suspicion, stayed in the Cedar Ridge house, which had become a museum of a life that no longer existed. The children, Sophie and Caleb, were fractured, grieving their mother, confronting their father's devastating secrets, and paralyzed by the not knowing. Detective Morelli felt a persistent, low-grade frustration. The evidence pointed to a willful disappearance, but the totality of Elena's vanishment was too absolute, too clean. It felt professional. The break came from a place of pure, mundane routine. In a public library in Portland, Maine, a reference librarian named Anya was tidying up the computer stations after the morning rush. As she cleared the browsing history on Terminal 4, a flash of a familiar face on the screensaver caught her eye. It was a news aggregator site, and the sidebar featured a still-missing blog. The pixelated photo was of a smiling, kind-faced woman. Anya froze. She'd just helped a quiet, polite woman at that very terminal print out some job application forms less than an hour before. The woman, who had given her name as Ellen, needed help attaching a resume from a USB drive. She bore a striking resemblance, but older, wearier, with shorter, darker hair and functional glasses. But the eyes were the same. Anya was a voracious reader of mystery novels, and a thrill of certainty, mixed with dread, shot through her. She quietly noted the time, then went to her supervisor. Detective Morelli received the call from the Portland Police Department with a surge of adrenaline. She was on the next flight. The library's internal security camera, while low resolution, provided a grainy image of a woman in a simple beanie and coat, her posture slightly hunched, using a computer. Morelli watched the footage, her heart hammering. It was Elena, but it wasn't. This woman moved with a deliberate, inconspicuous economy. She showed a Maine state ID to the librarian for computer access. The name, when Morelli accessed the record, was Elena Vance. A deeper dive revealed the stunning mechanism of her disappearance. Elena Vance was a completely legal new identity. Elena had used a provision in Maine law, one designed to protect victims of domestic violence and severe psychological trauma, to petition for a confidential name change. She had presented her evidence, the screenshots, the emails, psychological evaluations from a clinic in Portland citing acute traumatic stress, to a judge in a closed hearing. The old identity was sealed. A new social security number was issued. She had effectively been reborn by the system, with the law itself as her accomplice. Morelli traced the new identity. Elena Vance worked part-time at a no-kill animal shelter on the city's outskirts. She lived in a small, tidy studio apartment in a modest complex, paying rent in cashier's checks. She had a basic checking account with minimal activity. She had no social media, no car registered in her name, and used a prepaid mobile phone. She was a whisper, a careful, self-contained echo of the vibrant woman from Cedar Ridge. Morelli stood outside the animal shelter one misty morning, watching through the window as Elena, calmly cleaned kennels, her hands gentle with a nervous terrier. She wasn't a victim hiding in fear. She was a woman who had executed a meticulous, legal escape and was now living a purposefully small, quiet life. She had not been taken. She had conducted a precise and total evacuation of her former self. The small coastal park was empty in the gray morning light, the Atlantic a vast, murmuring slate. Detective Lisa Morelli approached the lone figure on the bench slowly, not wanting to startle her. Ellen, didn't turn. She simply patted the space beside her, as if she'd been expecting company. Morelli sat, the chill of the damp wood seeping through her coat. She didn't speak, letting the sound of the waves fill the space. "You found me," Ellen said finally, her voice calm, softer than in her old life, but clear. She explained not with emotion, but with the detached clarity of a surgeon describing a procedure. The 2 hours weren't a panic. They were a final, necessary surgery. The discovery was the diagnosis of a terminal condition. Her marriage, her identity, was a sickness. The suitcase, the cash, the SIM card, they were the instruments. She had spent years unconsciously building a fire escape, she said, a mental blueprint of survival born from a subtle, unnameable loneliness she could never justify. The evidence was merely the fire. She hadn't run from David, not exactly. She had run from the cacophony that would follow. The tears, the lies, the therapy speak, the pitying looks in the grocery store, the gargantuan effort of untangling 29 years in front of an audience. Most of all, she ran from the person she was within that lie, the trusting wife, the grateful partner. That woman had to be erased so a new one could breathe. The legal name change wasn't just a tactic, it was a baptism. Elena Vance was someone who could look at a bank statement, rent an apartment, and build a life without seeking permission or offering explanation. Detective Morelli asked the unspoken question, "What about your children?" A profound sadness touched Ellen's eyes then, the only crack in her serene composure. She had written them long letters, she explained, sent from a post office in New Hampshire months ago, to be delivered by a retained lawyer after she was settled. They contained the truth, her love, and her promise to reconnect when the dust had settled, not just for her, but for them. She knew her disappearance was a different kind of wound, but she believed a clean, surgical cut was kinder than a slow, public dismemberment of their family image. The final act, Ellen revealed, had already been set in motion. From this quiet bench overlooking the ocean, she had initiated divorce proceedings. David would be served at his office, the petition citing adultery and irreconcilable differences, filed under her new, legal name. The battle, if he dared to fight one, would occur on a battlefield of her choosing, with her identity protected. She held all the evidence. She had all the time. She was no longer a missing piece in his puzzle. She was the player who had quietly removed herself from his board and started a new game entirely. As Morelli rose to leave, she understood. This wasn't a crime to solve. It was a case to close. Elena Vance was gone, by her own meticulous design. In her place was Ellen, who had walked into the cold Atlantic of the unknown and, against all odds, learned to swim. She had traded a gilded cage for a small, sturdy key of her own making. The detective walked away, leaving the woman on the bench to watch the endless horizon, finally free to define what her own horizon would be.